Heinrich Tiaden was a German writer. Born in 1873 in Witten, the son of a workman, he went to school at Elberfeld and was educated as a book printer. Between 1904 and 1910 he worked at the August Bagel Verlag in Düsseldorf as a proofreader. From 1910 to 1914 he worked as editor on the Paulinus Verlag in Trier. Subsequently he worked as a dramaturg, first at the Berlin Film Society and then at the Trier Stadttheater until 1922. After 1922 he moved to Ebersteinburg, where he worked as a writer and editor until his death in 1949. Tiaden began publishing in 1905, mostly under his own name, but also using the pseudonyms Heribert Eberstein, Onkel Theobald, H. Nedeit or H. Denita. We will be dealing today with one of his early novels, his 1918 Der Dämon Asmo Luzi. The story begins in Rome with the starving, unsuccessful German artist Justus Rollinger hanging around the Fontana di Trevi. He is debating whether to go and spend his last lire on alcohol when he is suddenly accosted by a stranger who promises him wealth and fortune. An unlikely proposal, given the fact his last painting, Sunset by Rome, has spent goodness knows how long in the exhibit, and not only does not have a buyer yet, but its authenticity is openly mocked by Rollinger's artist colleagues. But the stranger, whose face constantly morphs and undulates in an unsettling manner, makes the water in the fountain into wine, and then makes Rollinger drink a drop of an invigorating drink, which would literally dissolve him from the inside out if he drank any more. Then all of a sudden a man comes to Rollinger, who is a penniless starving artist at this stage, and names himself as Rollinger's secretary. This man, named Asmo Luzi, furnishes Rollinger's poor lodgings with ample food supplies, and provides him with quality cigars, and all of this out of his own pocket, not demanding any pay until Rollinger becomes famous. Then, after drinking a mysterious drink prepared for him by Asmo Luzi, Rollinger suddenly is able to paint incredibly quickly, fashioning an image of Mary Magdalene, which, though ingeniously crafted, has a mystic, deeply blasphemous nature. This is instantly sold for an amazing sum, and Rollinger becomes a rich man. He is even introduced to a Teresa Grimaldi, a young widowed countess who falls in love with him. Rollinger travels through Europe, trying to escape Asmo Luzi's influence by faking an accident on sea, and then making his way onto the yacht of Lord Littleton, an English aristocrat and hopeless, unrequited lover of Countess Grimaldi, who wants Rollinger to paint his family chapel. The two nearly die in a shipwreck, but are miraculously saved by Asmo Luzi, thereafter making their way to Paris. Here Rollinger meets an Indian Rani who has some kind of connection to Asmo Luzi, and who has him paint her as the goddess Kali, the resulting painting being exhibited, making the entire fancy boarding house where Rollinger is staying break out into a wild orgy. The Rani, named Ramasutra, seems pleased and leaves the boarding house, ensuring the painting is exhibited publicly, which then causes hordes of people to go wild and causes riots and brawling in broad daylight. Leaving for London, Rollinger stays at the Lord's castle, drawing some paintings on the walls of the Lord's family chapel, which drives any woman that sees them to give herself over to lust and disloyalty, while any man that sees them falls madly in love with the model. Following a short affair, Rollinger's lover gets accidentally shot by her enraged husband, and another man drives off to Rome to try and force Teresa Grimaldi, the unwilling model of the chapel paintings, to become his lover, by any means necessary. Rollinger arrives in Rome, and just as Countess Teresa says she will try to free him from the devil's influence, she gets stabbed to death by the man from London. Rollinger then tries to obtain absolution through the church, but runs off in a mad rage when his painting of the Madonna has sinful, lust-filled eyes inspired by the devil himself. As he is being pursued by Asmo Luzi in the street, he makes his way to the Tiber River and falls in, and then wakes up at the hospital. Except he didn't fall into the Tiber, he fell into the Fontana di Trevi. Thusly, the entire book was just his fever dream. Yes, 300 pages of very small print to basically go, none of this actually happened. I understand the writer wanted to give his main character an out after having his every attempt at liberation be foiled in a manner as bleak and hopeless as I've only ever encountered in Strobel's Zauberkäfer. However, to sacrifice the entire book to do this was not a smart choice. It doesn't even make sense because there are plenty of scenes with other characters conversing without Rollinger being present, or even scenes delving into the characters' inner thoughts and emotions, which makes me suspect this either wasn't the intended ending, or the writer got carried away writing essentially a different book before having to crowbar it back in. As it stands, I can't even properly criticize faults with certain dropped plot points without the handy "it was a dream" excuse coming in to ruin my nitpicking. For example, Rollinger's English friend explains at length about the family ghost that appears whenever a member of the family is going to die, and how his family doctor shot at it once when he saw her. Despite taking up several pages, this ghost never actually appears, nor is really brought up again after that. Even worse is the Parisian subplot with Professor Mockery. Rollinger goes to him to discuss his own infernal connections, thinking the old man might help him somehow, but also goes there because Mockery discovered the secret to making gold. He never intends to use it, and Rollinger suddenly wants to seize the results from Mockery, but when he arrives for his second talk, he finds Mockery dead. He was actually almost assuredly killed by Asmo Luzi when he was stealing the results of Mockery's work in order to give them to Rollinger. Except the entire gold-making thing is immediately dropped and never brought up again a single time after Rollinger gets the manuscript, making that entire subplot seem like nothing but padding, which is already not a good idea when most of the novel consists of people standing around or sitting and talking about things. Of course, this is rendered a bit moot by the ending, but I still find these dropped plot points to be entirely unneeded and taking up way too much space that could have gotten us to the ending a whole lot quicker if it was already going to be a huge disappointment. I really didn't know how to feel about this book. It was good in the beginning, if a little static, with occasional hints of Asmo Luzi's satanic nature and of his dark intentions with the painter, essentially wanting him to create paintings which would destroy people morally so they could be claimed by hell. But that ending made the whole thing nothing more than a 300-page cautionary tale about the dangers of desiring fame.